The day started off clear in Pine Valley, the kind of morning you'd normally enjoy with a coffee on the porch while watching the ocean, but today my mind was somewhere else. In the parking lot of Valley View Plaza, my newly acquired shopping center, a woman with neatly styled gray hair and an impeccable suit was frantically photographing the new digital sign I had installed in front of my software office. At 38, I built my company from the ground up to become one of the country's top developers of business solutions. Buying Valley View Plaza was my latest investment, the shopping center just 2 blocks away from my home in the Pine Crest Estates condominium. The perfect location to move my main office and diversify my business. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. I watched the woman for a few minutes through the security circuit. Her face was twisted in disapproval as she measured the dimensions of the sign with a measuring tape. Something told me that this was Samantha Hayes, the infamous president of our homeowners association. Her reputation for being extremely strict with the condominium rules preceded her. "Mr. Matthews?" My assistant's voice came over the intercom, interrupting my observation. "There's a lady at the reception demanding to speak with the owner. She seems pretty determined." I took a deep breath. "Send her in." Samantha Hayes walked into my office like she owned the place already, a folder of documents pressed firmly against her chest and an expression mixing indignation and superiority. "I'm Samantha Hayes, president of the Pine Valley Homeowners Association." She didn't extend her hand for a greeting. "That digital sign you installed directly violates our community's aesthetic code. It has to be removed within 48 hours. I kept my tone calm and professional. "Ms. Hayes, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. This shopping center isn't under HOA jurisdiction. It's a commercial property zoned separately." She opened her folder and shoved a document toward me. "This map clearly shows that this entire area is within the association's boundaries. Pine Valley stretches all the way to the highway." I examined the document, immediately noticing that it was an altered version of the original map on file with the city. The boundary lines had been subtly modified to include the shopping center. Interesting. However, I have the official city document right here. I opened my laptop and showed her the files I had scanned during the purchase process. As you can see, Valley View Plaza is outside the residential jurisdiction of Pine Valley. Samantha frowned, but didn't back down. "This is an administrative error we're working on. In the meantime, the association's rules still apply. The sign is too big, too bright, and negatively impacts the value of neighboring properties. I obtained all the necessary permits from the city." I showed her the approved documents. "The sign complies with municipal regulations for commercial zones. The association's rules are more restrictive and take precedence. Not when it comes to properties outside the association's jurisdiction." I maintained a firm but polite voice. "Ms. Hayes, I respect the work the association does within the condominium limits, but this is an independent commercial establishment." She stood up abruptly. "I'm taking this to the association board. I hope you reconsider and remove this monstrosity voluntarily. Otherwise, we'll take appropriate action." 3 days later, I arrived at the office to find only cut wires where my $12,000 digital sign used to be. The security cameras had captured everything: Samantha Hayes and 2 men removing the sign at 3 a.m., loading it into a pickup truck and leaving. I immediately called the police and then my lawyer. The officer handling the case examined the recordings closely. "This is trespassing and theft, sir. Would you like to file a formal complaint?" I thought carefully. A prolonged legal battle would be exhausting. For now, I just want to file the report. I'll try to resolve this another way first. That night, I received the email I was expecting, a summons to an extraordinary meeting of the Homeowners Association. Samantha had scheduled a session in the community hall to discuss recent violations of aesthetic guidelines, clearly referring to my sign. What she didn't know was that I had purchased the entire shopping center, including the building where the association's community hall was hosted. I smiled when I saw the venue for the meeting. Sometimes the universe has a perfect sense of humor. I penciled in the date on my calendar and began preparing my presentation. The community hall was packed when I arrived for the meeting. Familiar faces from the neighborhood filled the chairs arranged in a semicircle, all whispering among themselves as Samantha organized her document on the main table. Alexander Roberts, the association's vice president and retired judge, sat next to her along with 4 other board members. I chose a discreet seat at the back row, watching as Samantha scanned the room with satisfaction. She looked completely in her element, the embodiment of authority. A middle-aged woman sitting near me leaned over and whispered. She removed my flower pots at the entrance last year. Said they violated the condominium's color scheme. The woman shook her head. They were just geraniums. May I have everyone's attention? Samantha's voice cut through the side conversations. I called this extraordinary meeting to discuss a serious violation of our community's aesthetic guidelines. A slide appeared on the screen showing my digital sign. This monstrosity was installed at Valley View Plaza without approval from the Aesthetic Committee. As you all know, we maintain strict standards to preserve our property values. Alexander Roberts coughed softly. Samantha, perhaps we should clarify the jurisdiction issue first. I've received some questions about whether the shopping center is really within the association boundaries. I've already resolved that, Alex. Samantha waved off the concern. I have here the documentation proving that the commercial area falls within our jurisdiction. She held up the same altered maps she had shown me. Faced with the owner's refusal to remove the sign, I was forced to take measures to protect our community. Samantha continued, adjusting her glasses. The sign was removed and is being stored safely until the owner agrees to replace it with something more appropriate. There was an uncomfortable silence in the room. Even her most fervent supporters seemed surprised by the admission of the unauthorized removal. Are you saying you removed the sign without a court order? Alexander asked, visibly upset. I took an administrative measure within my prerogatives as president. Samantha replied curtly. That was my cue. I calmly stood up and walked to the center of the room. Good evening, everyone. My name is David Matthews. I'm the owner of the sign in question, and I'd like to present some relevant facts. Samantha visibly paled upon recognizing me. Mr. Matthews, this is a private association meeting. As a resident, you'll have your turn to speak, but at the appropriate time. Actually, as the owner of this building, I believe I have the right to speak now. I connected my laptop to the projector while murmurs ran through the room. That's absurd. This is the association's community hall. Samantha protested. Which is located in Valley View Plaza, a property I acquired 4 months ago. I displayed the registered deed on the screen. By the way, the association is 3 months behind on rent for this space, but we can discuss that another time. The murmurs grew louder. Samantha struggled to maintain her composure, her expression toggling between disbelief and contained fury. I'd like to clarify 3 key points. I continued, showing the official city map. First, Valley View Plaza is legally outside the jurisdiction of the Homeowners Association, as proven by the city documents. I advanced to the next slide. Second, the digital sign I installed has all the necessary permits and authorizations, following every detail of the city's commercial zoning code. The third slide showed clear images from the security cameras. Third, and most serious, in the early hours of Tuesday morning, Ms. Hayes and 2 unidentified individuals trespassed on my property, vandalized the electrical installation, and removed equipment valued at $12,000. I have the police report right here. Alexander removed his glasses, massaging the bridge of his nose. Samantha, this is extremely serious. Trespassing and theft are criminal matters. I was only enforcing our rules. Samantha banged her hand on the table. This man is trying to destroy everything we built in Pine Valley. I have no interest in destroying anything. I replied calmly. As a resident of the condominium, I value a well-managed community. But as a businessman, I cannot permit illegal actions against my commercial property. I then showed an image of the damaged equipment. The sign was severely damaged during the improper removal. The electrical terminals were cut instead of properly disconnected, and the display has several scratches. Alexander turned to Samantha. "Where is the sign now?" "In my garage," she answered curtly. "It's perfectly safe." That means, besides theft, we're dealing with receiving stolen property. A man in the front row, whom I recognized as a lawyer, commented out loud. Samantha looked increasingly cornered. "I'm protecting the interests of the community. That sign is an eyesore that lowers the value of our homes." "Actually," I interjected politely, "real estate studies show that the proximity of well-managed shopping centers tends to increase the value of adjacent residential properties. I intend to transform Valley View Plaza into a modern, attractive space that will benefit all residents." The room was now divided into groups whispering among themselves. Samantha tried to regain control, repeatedly banging the gavel. "Mr. Matthews, you'll have to resolve this through the proper channels. This meeting isn't the appropriate forum to—" "Actually, Samantha," Alexander interrupted, "this is exactly the right forum. As board members, we need to face the facts. You acted without the board's authorization, potentially exposing the association to a lawsuit for damages." Martha Peterson, the treasurer, quickly consulted her tablet. "Our insurance policy does not cover unauthorized actions taken by individual board members. If Mr. Matthews decides to sue, the costs will come directly from our reserve fund." An hour of heated discussions followed, with several residents expressing their opinions. To my surprise, most weren't concerned about the sign itself, but about how Samantha had conducted the situation. "Please, raise your hand if you agree that Ms. Hayes exceeded her authority and put the association at legal risk," Alexander eventually suggested. Almost every hand went up. "The board will meet in a private session to discuss the next steps," Alexander announced. "We ask that the residents await our official communication tomorrow." As the crowd dispersed, several neighbors who had never spoken to me before approached. Many shared their own stories about unpleasant encounters with Samantha, fines for unapproved plants, warnings for leaving the trash on the sidewalk 10 minutes past the allowed time, and threats over paint shades slightly different from what was approved. The next morning, I received a call from Alexander Roberts. "Mr. Matthews, on behalf of the association board, I want to extend our sincerest apologies for the incident with your sign. Ms. Hayes acted on her own, without board authorization. I appreciate your call, Mr. Roberts. Your sign will be returned today, and the association will cover the costs of repair or replacement. In addition, I want to inform you that after an emergency meeting, the board voted to remove Samantha Hayes from the presidency, effective immediately. I was genuinely surprised by the swift decision. That's a very serious measure. Trust has been irreparably broken. As vice president, I will serve as interim president until new elections are held next month." Alexander paused. "We also formally acknowledge that Valley View Plaza is not under the association's jurisdiction. We are correcting all the maps and documents." 2 hours later, an association pickup truck pulled up in front of my office. 2 maintenance employees unloaded my damaged sign with embarrassed expressions. "We apologize for the inconvenience, sir." One of them handed me an envelope. "Mr. Roberts asked us to give you this as well." Inside was a check covering the full cost of a new sign and a handwritten note. "On behalf of Pine Valley, we hope to build a more positive relationship moving forward." I was examining the damage to the sign when my phone rang. It was from an unknown number. "Mr. Matthews?" Samantha's voice sounded very different, tense and controlled. "We need to talk about a settlement." "Ms. Hayes, I thought the association had already resolved the matter." "I'm not speaking for the association anymore," she replied curtly. "I'm proposing a personal settlement. If you withdraw the police report, we can close this matter once and for all. I appreciate your concern, but the police report has already been filed." "Listen," her voice took on a threatening tone, "you may have won this battle, but I still live just 3 houses away from you. I noticed your side fence is 2 centimeters above the allowed limit and your front rose bushes aren't on the approved species list. I took a deep breath, realizing that Samantha hadn't learned anything from the episode. Ms. Hayes, I believe the association will hold a community meeting next week. Maybe we should continue this conversation there, with witnesses present. This isn't over. She abruptly hung up. I looked at the damaged sign and then at the check in my hand. Samantha may have lost the presidency, but she still clearly considered herself the supreme authority in Pine Valley. Something told me that the real battle was just beginning. That afternoon at the community meeting, the atmosphere in Pine Valley was almost palpable. The main conference room at my shopping center, a space much larger than the association's hall, was set up to accommodate all the residents. Alexander Roberts had arranged the location to handle what promised to be a record attendance. I arrived early and watched as seats quickly filled up. Entire families were present, something rare at association meetings according to comments I overheard. In the front row, Samantha Hayes sat perfectly upright, dressed in a flawless pearl gray outfit, as if she were about to assume her usual leadership role with ease. Mr. Matthews. Alexander greeted me with a firm handshake. Thanks again for providing the space. We needed a neutral location for this discussion. No problem. I hope we can resolve everything civilly. That's the goal. He lowered his voice. I should warn you that Samantha spent the entire week rallying her allies. She's determined to reverse your removal. The meeting started promptly at 7 p.m. Alexander opened the proceedings with a brief explanation of recent events and the board's decision. Before we move on to the main topic, I want to clarify that this isn't a regular association meeting. It's a special assembly where every resident will have a voice. Our first item is to discuss the association's leadership. Samantha immediately raised her hand. Once given permission to speak, she walked to the center of the hall with her usual confidence. Neighbors and friends, she began, her voice modulated to sound sincere. I have served this community for 11 years as president. Under my leadership, Pine Valley has become one of the most valued condominiums on this coast. Our properties have appreciated on average 15% above the regional market. Some nods among the audience seemed to encourage her. Yes, I made a judgment error regarding the sign. She conceded with a calculated gesture of humility. I was thinking in the community's best interest, but I should have followed the proper procedures. For that, I publicly apologized to Mr. Matthews. She turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a strategic move that didn't fool me and was clearly intended to win over the audience. However, her tone hardened slightly. Removing me permanently from office over a single lapse in judgment is an extreme reaction that undermines the stability of this community. I propose that the board reconsider their decision and allow me to continue serving, now with more experience and caution. When she finished, polite applause ran through the room, mostly from her longtime supporters, homeowners in the more upscale areas of the condominium. Alexander thanked her for her contribution and asked if anyone else wanted to speak. To my surprise, a line quickly formed in the center hall. The first to speak was Marcus Daniels, a university professor who had lived in Pine Valley for 5 years. I respect Ms. Hayes' work in maintaining high standards in our community, he began politely, but there's a worrying trend we need to address. Last year, I received 4 fines for supposed violations. One was for leaving my car parked in my own driveway for over 72 hours while I was at an academic conference. Others followed with similar accounts. Eleanor White, a 68-year-old widow, recounted how she was fined for planting sunflowers in her backyard, an area not even visible from the street. James and Maria Cortez shared how they were threatened with daily fines for installing a small swing for their special needs daughter until they finally gave in and removed it. With each new testimony, Samantha's face grew tenser. Eventually, she stood up again. These complaints are exaggerated. Her voice lost some of its carefully practiced softness. Everyone agreed to the rules when they moved here. If you don't want to follow the regulations, perhaps Pine Valley isn't the right place for you. A heavy silence followed that statement. It was then that Rebecca Johnson, a quiet resident who rarely spoke at meetings, rose from her seat in the back row. My 8-year-old son cried for 2 nights when you made him take apart the treehouse we built together. Her voice trembled slightly. A treehouse in our backyard, completely safe, and not even visible from the street. You said that unapproved structures were not allowed, even if no one besides us could see it. Rebecca took a deep breath. But what really brought me here today was something I recently found out. Ms. Hayes denied my request to install solar panels on my roof, claiming aesthetic concerns. 3 weeks later, I discovered that she is a consultant for Pacific Energy Corporation, which provides electricity for the community. There is a clear conflict of interest that was never disclosed. A murmur ran through the room as Samantha visibly paled. Alexander, clearly disturbed by the information, called for silence. Ms. Hayes, would you like to respond to that allegation? That's completely irrelevant to today's discussion. She replied sharply. My consultancy with Pacific Energy is just a side job and does not affect the association's decisions. Then Patricia Lawson, a member of the Finance Committee, stood up. As a member of the Finance Committee, I must inform everyone that we've never seen any disclosure of a conflict of interest in the official reports. This is a direct violation of our bylaws, Section 8, Paragraph 3, which requires full disclosure of any business relationships that could affect association decisions. The meeting had now taken a turn that Samantha clearly hadn't expected. Her small group of supporters seemed to dwindle with each new revelation. Alexander briefly consulted with the other board members before addressing the assembly again. Given the testimonies presented today, I believe we should proceed with a formal vote on Ms. Hayes' status on the association board. A ballot system was set up so that everyone could express their opinion freely without pressure. During the process, I noticed Samantha checking her phone frantically, typing messages with trembling fingers. An hour later, the results were announced. 97% of the residents voted for the permanent removal of Samantha Hayes not only from the presidency but from any position on the association board. The result was so decisive that even her most loyal allies looked embarrassed. Alexander formally assumed the interim presidency until the next regular elections, promising a complete review of the association rules with broad resident participation. He also announced the formation of an ethics committee to investigate the conflict of interest allegations. As the meeting ended, I noticed Samantha sitting alone, her face a mask of disbelief. No one came up to console or support her. She methodically gathered her things and walked toward the exit, her posture still rigid but visibly shaken. In the parking lot, I saw her standing by her white Mercedes-Benz, apparently dazed. Her phone rang and she answered hesitantly. Even from a distance, I could tell the conversation wasn't pleasant. Her gestures grew more agitated, and her voice occasionally rose before returning to a controlled tone. When she finally hung up, she leaned against the car and stood still for several minutes, staring into space. I decided to approach. Ms. Hayes? Are you all right? She turned to me, her expression mixing anger and despair. Happy with what you got? You destroyed everything I built in this community. It was never my intention to cause personal harm. I just wanted to resolve the issue of the sign. Well, congratulations. Her voice was laden with bitterness. That call was from my boss at Luxury Coast Realty. I was placed on unpaid administrative leave while they investigate complaints about my professional conduct. Apparently, some Pine Valley residents are also clients of the real estate firm and voiced concerns. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't anticipated that the consequences would extend into her professional life. I worked 17 years at Luxury Coast. She continued, her voice now lower. I am the top-selling realtor in high-end properties. I'm sorry to hear that. Perhaps it's only temporary while. I don't need your fake sympathy. She interrupted sharply. You don't understand what it means to build something for years and see it all crumble in one devastating week. With those words, she got into her car and slammed the door. Through the window, I saw something I never imagined witnessing, Samantha Hayes in tears, her hands gripping the steering wheel as she tried to regain her composure. As she drove away, I reflected on how positions of power, even in small contexts like a homeowners association, can profoundly change people. Samantha probably started out with good intentions, keeping the condominium spotless, protecting property values. At some point, power became an end in itself, rules turned into weapons, and respect morphed into fear. I returned to the conference room, now almost empty. Alexander and a few members of the new interim board were discussing plans for a more transparent and collaborative association. Mr. Matthews, Alexander smiled when he saw me. We were just talking about establishing a better relationship with the shopping center. Perhaps an integrated community event? Something that benefits both the residents and the business owners. Sounds like a great idea, I replied, noticing how the atmosphere was already becoming lighter and more optimistic. I'm thinking of installing a small playground near the food court. That would be a good start. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. As I left the building, I passed by the new sign that I had installed the previous day, more elegant and efficient than the old one, yet still perfectly visible and functional. A symbol that it was possible to combine commercial practicality with pleasing aesthetics without excessive control or abuse of power. Pine Valley was about to enter a new phase, and I was eager to be a part of that transformation.